George Strait, a nation music icon, says that music isn't everything. The famous country singer was about to retire from music to devote more time to his marriage to Norma Strait. Norma is a steadying influence in George's life and work, and she has been instrumental in his success. Even in the music video for his song Código, she was there for him the whole time. Still, Norma needs George's support as she deals with the lingering effects of a shared tragedy. Even though they hadn't spoken yet, George Strait and his wife met while he was a high school student. They crossed paths occasionally, but that was about it. Perhaps George was being coy because he was too busy to fully commit. John Byron Strait Sr. was a classroom teacher at the junior high level and the owner of a 2,000-acre cattle ranch outside of Big Wells, Texas. Consequently, tending to the cattle ranch would typically take up George's weekend activities. George liked his summertime job at the ranch. On the other hand, he eventually asked Norma out on a date. She was gorgeous to George, and he went so far as to call her hot. Despite this, he didn't see her for quite some time following their one date. Was George's reluctance to commit to Norma due to anything other than his being preoccupied with life's routines? His parents' divorce caused his family to split up while he was in 4th grade. John Buddy Jr. and his father remained in the household while Pensy moved in with their mother. Along with his father and brother Buddy, he persisted in tending to the family farm. Yet, George couldn't shake the feeling that his life was lacking something. Norma remained in his thoughts, even if he never saw her again. Consequently, he approached her once more, and the two started dating while they were both students at Pearsall High School. If we're talking about George's time in high school, it wasn't just for romance. George enjoyed his life as a cowboy roper and working on the ranch, but he also had a strong desire to pursue music. Music was George's life, and he aspired to play an instrument. Though he is now most known for his country songs, George's early musical influences were more in the rock and roll tradition. George was swept up in the rock fad of the British invasion era, just like a lot of young Americans back then. He was a member of the Stoics, a band at Pearsall High School that mostly listened to the Beatles and other British musicians for inspiration. Although there were many fans of rock from the British invasion, George's choice of genre was intriguing given the popularity of country music in Texas at the time. He actually preferred Farmer's Report to country music on the radio because he was that disconnected from it. He performed for a number of other bands after following the path that rock and roll took him, but then something happened. Seeing a live performance of country music was George's last straw for listening to the genre. And their show prompted him to watch other live performances of country music. Thus, he shifted his musical tastes. He became enamored with country music and started listening to artists such as Hank Thompson, George Jones, Hank Williams, Lefty Frizzle, Merle Haggard, George Jones, and Hank Thompson on a regular basis. At last, with his genre selection in hand, George appeared to be embarking on the path to a career as a professional musician. Nevertheless, he lacked certain essentials. The first ebb and flow of George's relationship with Norma had left him eager to move on. What he did not say afterwards could be interpreted as either romantic or completely insane, or perhaps a combination of the two. After finishing high school, he and Norma eloped to Mexico, where they were married on December 4, 1971. They were up against everything, and George relished the challenge. George and Norma returned to Pearsall for their church wedding after they were married. Their union had all the makings of a fairy tale romance, but the tragedy that followed would have made even the most heartless writer shudder. Norma and George were blissfully unaware of the impending tragedy that would shatter their idyllic existence. In addition to his wife, country music and cowboy roping were among of George's greatest passions. Being a patriot, he enlisted fearlessly in 1971 when the time came. He couldn't wait to serve his country. Strait enlisted and was assigned to the Hawaii-based Schofield Barracks as an infantryman. Norma moved to Hawaii with him after he was posted there, and they started living together. Then, his wife gave birth to their daughter Jennifer on October 6, 1972, and they were officially a family. George finally got his heart's desire. Of course, he promptly corrected what wasn't perfect. Still, George never let go of his love of music. And he made the most of his night when the chance to perform presented itself. He got into the Rambling Country Band, which was funded by the Army, after an audition. The band members alternated between playing on and off the bass. George and Norma had a happy life. They were unprepared for the impending calamity. After George's 1975 separation from the Army as a corporal, he enrolled in Texas State University to pursue a degree in agriculture. Although his lifelong ranch labor made this option predictable, I still don't understand why he didn't go into music instead. Although George never formally studied music, he was always surrounded by it. Flyers for the country band Stony Ridge were displayed all over campus at Texas State University, where George happened to be a student. They were in need of a new lead singer, so Strait wasted no time in trying out for the position. He went so far as to rebrand the group as the Ace and become an integral part of it. The band's Texas shows were largely at dive bars and honky-tonks. They quickly gained regional popularity and started opening for national groups like Asleep at the Wheel and the Texas Playboys. The band was offered the option to record singles by Houston-based independent label D-Record as their regional recognition rose. Strait composed the tunes, and it was a fantastic opportunity for them, but the music bombed. Norma continued to encourage Strait, even though he was becoming increasingly irritated. Strait still working during the day on the cattle ranch his father owned so that he and his family could make ends meet. After their recordings with D-Record bombed, George severed ties to the music industry. But that didn't stop him and his band from performing with all their hearts. George became acquainted with E.R.V. Woolsey, who they met through their enthusiasm. Woolsey, the manager of a venue where George's band performed. Woolsey was an employee of MCA Records, a renowned record label. Woolsey started telling his friends and acquaintances about George and his band. Despite their adoration for George and his band, these individuals didn't think his music would have widespread commercial success. How was this particular style responsible for his disapproval? To find out, continue watching. Despite his disappointment, George knew he couldn't give up now. He got back up and started to give it his all. Despite George's best efforts, he was unsuccessful on his journey to Nashville. No matter how many studios he tried, they all turned him down. George was eventually done as his confidence was eroded by the disappointments. If music wasn't going to bring in enough money to support his family, he would find another means to make a living. George received a job opportunity to construct ranch cow cages in the midst of his music career's setbacks. The task was known, and although he was dreading it, he knew he had to do it. As if his aspirations of being a famous musician were about to die, George informed the band that he was going to leave. Unhappy was Norma. Neither she nor her husband wanted to be the cause of her husband's musical disillusionment. She was aware that her husband lacked enthusiasm for producing cow pens. She had a heart-to-heart with him over the phone and begged him to give music another go for another year. George wished he could spare Norma the pain of heartbreak. He could never bring himself to hurt her. As a result, he committed to his music career for another year. Fortunately, George's 1981 decision to listen to Norma paid off when MCA signed him to a recording contract. Nevertheless, a snag existed. George was given a single opportunity with them. The possibility of recording an album would be considered if his single was successful. George needed that one opportunity. Unwound was George's debut single for MCA Records, and he released it alongside his band as backup. The track was a huge success. Album release was assured when the single peaked at number 6 on Billboard Hot Country Songs. With the publication of Straight Country, George's debut album, he instantly became a sensation. His voice was thought to be invigorating. An alternative to the pop-influenced country music that was popular back then. Many began to see George's music as the new standard for classic country. The sound was lauded for bringing country music back to its origins and went well with his genuine cowboy persona. Even the most brilliant stars eventually fade, and George cemented his position as one of the industries from that record onward. Not much good came to George in 1981, aside from the triumph of his debut album and single. George Bubba Strait Jr. was born to him and his wife Norma, who had their second child together. Just as his career was taking off, George achieved even greater success in 1982 with the release of Fool-Hearted Memory, which became his first #1 single. He was finally able to bring his many interests together in 1983, after another of his songs, Amarillo by Morning, reached number 5 on the Western Ballads chart in 1982. Are we clear on what we mean? George had to step in and headline the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo in 1983 after the great country artist Eddie Rabbitt fell ill. It appeared like everything George touched became gold, since this was another milestone in his career. He even had a 5-album streak from 1983 to 1984 that peaked at number 1 on Billboard. George went from being ready to call it quits in the music industry in 1981 to winning Top Male Vocalist at the Country Music Awards. in the same way that his projects keep topping the charts. His wife maintained domestic stability even as he advanced in his job. For the sake of her children's constant supervision, Norma decided to give up her work since her husband would be gone for long periods of time. She acted as a nurturing mother to her kids and a dependable wife to her husband. Her family flourishes because she prioritized their needs. Even more impressively, Strait was named top male vocalist at the Country Music Awards once again. Even though it was a tremendous triumph for him, he would give it all up to undo the catastrophe that had devastated him and his wife. Norma did her utmost to monitor her children. Jessica, her first child, had a large social circle as she entered puberty at the age of 13. Norma and her husband were somewhat possessive of her friends, so they made an effort to keep tabs on her social life. Therefore, her parents didn't see any reason not to let her go out in 1986. They gave her permission to hang out with her pals. They felt their daughter needed to experience some level of freedom at 13 years old. On that fateful night in 1986, they would lay eyes on their daughter for the final time. Without fastening her seatbelts, she rode in the front seat of the vehicle she had been using when she stepped out. At the time of the turn, driver Gregory Wilson Allen was traveling at an excessive speed. He was going too fast for the turn and lost control. Jennifer was instantly crushed to death as the automobile rolled over on her side. She had not buckled up, so she was thrown partially out of the vehicle. The driver faced Class A misdemeanor charges for vehicular homicide, although the crime had already been committed. Jennifer had no intention of returning. Her experience drove home the value of paying attention and following road laws. George and his wife's frailty were further highlighted by her occurrence. Both of them were totally broken. Particularly devastated was Norma's heart, and George felt compelled to proclaim it. Interviews were no longer part of his routine. He stayed clear of any public conversation that would bring up the subject of how his daughter's death had affected him and Norma. There had to be a way for Norma to cope with her loss. She felt she had failed in her duty. Thus, the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation was established in 1986 by Norma and George. Norma hoped that other children would not have to go through what Jennifer did by establishing the foundation and returning their lives to a normalcy. Norma was a dedicated co-founder who saw her work as an opportunity to help children in need. Bubba, her son, was only around 5 years old when his mother died, but she still had to be there for him. While George kept performing, she kept caring for her son. As a musician, he never took a vacation. He was unable to rest. The setback rocked him. And singing was his sole means of avoiding a descent into despair. George channeled his anguish at the loss of his child into his songs and live performances. His string of 11 consecutive top-charting singles began in 1986 and continued until 1989. He finally surpassed the famous Conway Twitties in terms of the most #1 songs on Billboard's Hot Country Songs list because to his string of successful singles. Furthermore, he would surpass all other artists in terms of the amount of #1 singles across all genres. Nominations for the Academy of Country Music Awards and the Country Music Awards came the way of the iconic artist's dominating streak of number songs. In terms of nominations for those two prizes, he would have the most. After that, in 1989 and 1990, George was named Entertainer of the Year by the Country Music Association. The ACM Entertainer of the Year award came his way in 1990 as well. In 2013, and again in 2014 for Performer of the Year at the ACM Awards, before taking home yet another CMA. At this very moment, no country performer has won more honors than him with those two. In the realm of country music, George is simply unmatched. Legends spread even about his tours. He made a ton of money thanks to his festival-type tours, which he also invented, and his new classic country music style. Not only did George get the cash, but his legendary stature also rose. At AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, in June 2014, his The Cowboy Rides Away tour drew 104,793 fans, allowing him to set a new record for the biggest indoor concert in North America. He wasn't going to attract this kind of audience. With a crowd of more than 110,905 at Kyle Field in College Station, Texas, he became the first American artist to ever sell more than 110,905 tickets to a single event in 2024. However, he has performed in front of much larger audiences, such as the one at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. With over 20 performances under his belt, he entertained over 1 million rodeogoers. He was a major character and musical performer for the event. George has wowed audiences at festivals and concerts, yet the quantity of recordings sold much beyond any of those two metrics. With over 120 million recordings sold globally, George has cemented his position as one of the most accomplished and best-selling musicians of all time. His 33 albums have received platinum or gold certifications, and he has even claimed the title of 12th best-selling album recording artist in the US. Has sold more than 70 million records in the US alone. He will be inducted into the Hollywood Walk of Fame in the 2025 class as a result of his accomplishments. I don't know why it took them so long to induct him. The loss of their daughter continues to reverberate through George and his wife's lives, even after his induction. They choose not to discuss it. George and Norma diverged the one occasion they broached the subject of her demise. Instead of bemoaning her departure, they expressed gratitude for the 13 years they had spent with her. This demonstrated the couple's resilience by demonstrating their ability to find gratitude in the face of adversity.